approval and concurrent preliminary plan development plan plat approval. A similar project, similar PD project was approved under the same name in 2006. However, all previous approvals have expired. Therefore, they are seeking a new approval, and the plan is a slightly modified version, but for the most part, it's the same number of units and same name, same location. A brief slide about the plan development process. stormwater treatment, and installing all required improvements. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions of staff?
I do, Ryan. With respect to the sunset provision, the LDRs were revised to address that, and that applies to any type applicable similar type developments. So there is no kind of necessary sunset provisions on these types of developments anymore. Is that correct?
Sure, Mr. Chair, Mr. Emmons.
this particular provision, and this was really given direction by the Board of County Commissioners to waive the normal fee of $75, to waive that for any applicant coming in, and to reduce the cleanup bond. It's normally $200. Community felt it would be good incentive to have some cleanup bond requirement, and the $25 amount was identified during community meetings. The application would be reviewed by planning, traffic, fire, building, solid waste, sheriff, and health department, and it would be like any other temporary use permit issued by staff. There wouldn't be any public hearings or anything like that, and really no need for one. The community development director, per the ordinance, could terminate a permit that was issued if it just wasn't used, lack of performance or use. Again, that kind of goes back to what the community wanted was, there may be sort of testing out sites, how it might work and so forth. But if something's not working or not being used, to terminate it and allow somebody else to come in and give it a try. Generally, the ordinance is supported by the community based on community input and supported by staff. Again, it allows for a farmers market. We're calling it kind of an experiment, to try to see where it would work, how it would work, and so forth. And again, it's not something that the counties out there are going to be doing. We're really looking to private sector or community group to come in, but it'll give them opportunity to do it and establish something that the community can ultimately, I think, enjoy and identify with, and restore basically a traditional type of use that's been indifferent in the past. Staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance. Be glad to try to answer any questions that you all might have, and I believe there's representation from the community here as well.
Any questions?
Yeah, in the case where there's a public park involved, it requires coordination with the Parks Department and then also Board of County Commissioner approval. Is that for every event in that park, or just identify a park and it's just a one-time Board of County Commissioner approval?
Right. Essentially, the county owns the park property and is in charge of the operations that go on there. So there could be any number, as kind of the landlord, so to speak. The Board of County Commissioners could put any kind of conditions or test it out or time frame sort of thing from that perspective. So the regulations don't go into those details and don't need to, but you're correct. Any type of use of the park
location. It also means the price of that particular food. They can't go into some of those stores that have organic because it just costs too much. I can get 2 of these here for $1, but it costs $5 for one over here. Which one I'm going to buy? The one that's less expensive, but it may not be the best one for you. What we're hoping there in Gifford is to present a menu of items as far as vegetables and foods so that people can take a look at it and realistically be able to purchase that item and go home and cook
Gifford, the area of Gifford that lies east of 58th Avenue and west of US number 1. That's like either that end, or is it in the center? Is there a specific location, a
Yes.
site?
Essentially, there's no individual site. It has to be within essentially a box, a theoretical box, bounded on the north by 49th Street, on the south by the City of Vero Beach city limits, on the west by 58th, and on the east by US 1, somewhere within that geographic area.
Okay, so now who would set that at, who would establish the site location? Is that something?
That would be up to an applicant who can meet the other criteria. One of the criteria is that it would have to be on a public park site within that theoretical box, or on a commercial or industrially designated and zoned site within that theoretical box, and along a major roadway, a major thoroughfare, such as 43rd Avenue, 49th Street, 45th Street, US 1.
So you're saying that this could be anywhere in that box?
No. It could be anywhere in that box, but that's not the only rule. It would have to be along one of those major roadways. It would have to be properly zoned or a park site. So there's a number of locational criteria. But
Okay.
yes, it would have to be within that box, properly zoned or park site.
And then the fee would be $75 to $200? Is that?
No, there would be no fee.
No
for
fee?
the $75 fee is waived by the proposed ordinance. There would be a $25 cleanup bond that would be in place for the life of the permit, the temporary use permit.
Okay, all right. And how much of that money would go back to, or if there's any money collected, any of that money is going to go back to the Gifford area?
The $25 cleanup bond is returned when the temporary use permit is expired or it's over, as long as the site is clean.
As long as the site is clean, okay, that makes sense. At any time when right now we're waiving the fee, but possibly next year they might implement a fee. At what point, or is that a consideration in the future, that if there are any fees taken, that we could put some of that money back into the Gifford area for infrastructural repairs and other much-needed things, or even economic growth?
I think because the fee is specifically addressed in the ordinance would have to be changed if the board ever wanted to start charging a fee. And I think that'd be the time to ask about funds. I don't think that this is seen as in any way any type of fundraiser in terms of funding that the county would get in any way. Again, this would be organized by a private entity or a not-for-profit or some kind of combination. And again, the hope would be that there would be, I think, that there would be low overhead, easy for vendors to get in and out, and for the products to be affordable.
So if I have an empty lot and it's commercial, I could come and decide that, hey, you can use my lot, pay your deposit on my lot.
Right. If you had the proper zoning and you're along one of the major roadways, you could authorize someone to come in and apply, and you could work out your own lease or what have you with that entity. That's correct.
On my lot. And then what kind of tax consideration would I get for commercial property? I'm a business person, mostly groceries.
Right.
That's why I'm saying that.
Talking about property tax?
Well, I mean, if I utilize my property, commercial, and I decide I'm going to let maybe 12 people set up some booths and so forth, and then they're going to possibly pay $25 cleanup fee, and then I'm going to take all of the risk. The question I'm trying to ask is, as a property owner, would I get some type of tax consideration or any kind of considerations, whatever those are, if I'm going to put out all the risk?
I think that's up to the property owner. There's not a
I wouldn't see that the
Right.
county would be giving any kind of special tax breaks or anything like this. I think the break that the county is giving right now is they're pretty much waiving the majority of the fees to give the Gifford community an opportunity to have this type of business in their community.
What if I'm sued, someone falls, break their leg or something?
You would have to carry
it's
your
on
own
my property?
liability insurance for your property.
Okay.
It
So,
wouldn't be the county's responsibility.
well, if the county's going to collect some money, what I'm saying,
They're collecting a cleanup fee.
Right.
That's all.
And what you get back.
Correct.
so maybe the property owner should collect the cleanup fee, would not, if they're going to take all the risk.
That wouldn't,
Again, whatever arrangement a property owner works out with an applicant that's up to them.
correct. Do you have anything
That's
you want to
not
offer, Bill?
unreasonable, is it?
Just want to make sure. Do you have anything you want to
No,
offer, Bill?
no, you're right on so far.
That's what I'm looking at, you know, because I'm a business owner, Mosley Groceries, 55 years in Indian River County, the oldest African business. And I would be interested in doing that, but not all of the risk. So if there would be some type of consideration, if there's some types of fees, hey, let us all, like, pull in the rope. You win, I win, we all win.
Probably you would have to find those considerations with whomever is going to use your property and make your business deal there. That's beneficial
I
to
think
yourself.
I think that's what Stan was saying, is that you would work that out between you, the property owner, and whoever is going to run the farmer's market on your land. So you'd work the insurance out with them, if you want to establish your own set of fees, you could probably do that. So it'll be between you and whoever is running the farmer's market on your lot and not the county.
So why would the people pay the non-refundable or either refundable cleanup fee to the county and the county not, you understand what I'm saying?
It's a
Then it should go
deposit.
to the landowner that's taking all of the risk.
Just like it's a deposit that they're putting down. The deposit is, and the deal is, if when you're done with your use and the property is clean, the county gives you the $25 back. We don't keep any money. Nothing is retained by the county. We aren't charging anybody any fees or anything like that. We're simply saying to the applicant, whoever comes in for this permit, no matter where the location may be, if it's on a public park or if it's on private property, as long as you keep your property clean after the event is over, you get your money back.
And how would you know that? I need to contact you if I...
Somebody would come out and inspect, just like when you rent a pavilion at a park and you put down a deposit on the pavilion, you clean up after yourself, you get your deposit back.
I think what would typically happen is an owner would authorize an applicant to come in and the applicant would put down the $25. And it'd just be between staff and the applicant. That's usually the way it would work.
With the staff and the applicant of the commercial property of a private owner property. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. Is that...
Well, yes.
Am I getting that?
I think what is contemplated here is that someone will take the responsibility on their shoulders to organize all of the vendors. You know, we've got fruit people here, we've got vegetable people here, we've got juice people here. We're going to bring them all together and we're going to set up on one location. And I'm the organizer of this. I'm going to go ahead and submit my application to staff. I'm going to pay the $25 deposit to keep the property clean. And then I am going to make sure that each individual vendor cleans up after themselves, sells the right type of stuff, doesn't have alcoholic beverages or illegal foods or what have you, that it's all in compliance with the code.
So that probably would be better on a public park, not a private owner. Okay, I just wanted to get clarity. That's probably more for the park than...
Right,
Wouldn't you-
I'm
wouldn't you
not
say
sure
so?
this is the business opportunity you
Right.
think it might be.
Right. I think you're right. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Dan, there's other public property in the area. can you think of, I was just thinking of like the sheriff has a lot of property out there that would fall within the boundaries of this. Would you consider saying a park or other publicly owned property?
I wouldn't at this point in time. The reason why is in the community meeting, I think the idea was you want an easy to identify site that's going to be along one of the major roadways. It's kind of in the heart of Gifford, hopefully. And, go to jail and get your vegetables. I don't know how marketing would work for that. But
I was thinking more along.
I know what you mean. I think the idea was to have a certain to have these kind of higher profile sites. I think was the idea. Again, we'll see if it
You're looking
works.
for commercial viability, right? Yeah.
Would 43rd Avenue with the supervisor of elections and that string of public buildings qualify as commercial?
I don't. I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure that they're zoned commercial. Do you recall? You think they're industrial? Yeah. So there could be, but again, you'd have to work with someone who was willing to. You might have security measures in terms of what they have around their building and so forth. So, and I can tell you that the community also discussed, and there was. I think unanimous consensus, not to use an institutional site like a church site or anything like that, commercial or park. And again, I think it's because of basically the prominence of it, and that the community would identify it as a community spot.
Anybody else from the public like to speak?
Julianne Price, Department of Health, and just wanted to voice that we support this ordinance wholeheartedly, and I believe it will increase access to healthy fruits and vegetables, and that's needed in Gifford. So we support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Would anybody else like to speak? Nobody else like to speak? I'll close the public hearing. Do you guys have any other questions of staff? No. Can I get a motion, please?
Move to approve staff's recommendations.
Second.
I have a motion to approve. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Next order of business. Consideration of proposed regulations allowing limited recreational vehicle spaces in mobile home parks located adjacent to Interstate 95 and west of 90th Avenue. This matter is legislative. Stan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, a little bit of background on this particular item. The county has existing regulations that allow up to 25% of mobile home park spaces to be used for RVs, but it's currently limited to small parks. That change was made several years ago, and is limited to parks that are 20 acres and smaller in size, and that were in existence as of January 1st, 2010. And that current 20-acre limit was based on a couple of things. One was we found that there was, in some of the smaller parks, especially ones that have been along US 1 that had been in existence since, say, the 50s, traditionally had a mix of mostly mobile homes, but also had some areas or an area where they had RVs, and it seemed to work okay from a land use standpoint. And so that was kind of the basis for the 20-acre limit, that it seemed to work on smaller sites. And there were concerns expressed by residents in some of the larger parks, such as Village Green and Countryside, that they didn't want that mix in there. And so the 20-acre limit was put in the code and is still there today. And to date, we've had a few of the smaller parks do the kind of the mix of RVs, again limiting it to 25%. And actually, it was a small park, a resident-owned small park, that came in and asked for that change several years ago, and it helped them, I think, financially. And some of the people that they had, became longer-term residents who used the RVs. So again, our experience so far is we're not aware of any land use conflicts for that existing allowance. Back in March of this year, Lakewood Village residents and representatives approached the Board of County Commissioners for a regulation change, and the board accepted, I think, the rationale of allowing this RV a certain percentage of RVs in a mobile home park that was adjacent to I-95, being in that particular proximity. And there is a Lakewood Village phase that's located west of 90th Avenue and adjacent to I-95, and that's the only mobile home park site that meets those locational criteria. And the board directed staff to initiate an LDR change, and that's what's before you all this evening. After the direction from the board, staff coordinated with Lakewood Village representatives and certain Lakewood Village residents, basically through email. And what we've heard is mostly support. One resident did express some concerns about, kind of the mix of mobile homes and RVs. But again, we've got some criteria that are in the proposed ordinance that seem to have worked in other locations. We also coordinated with Village Green and indirectly with Countryside representatives, and they expressed no concerns since the proposed ordinance is quite narrowly written. So well, again, we've kept those people advised of this particular proposal through an email group that we use. So we may have some members of the public here tonight on this particular item, and again, we're in contact with representatives. The proposed ordinance as written would keep that existing allowance for pre-2010 small parks, 20 acres or less. No change to that. It would allow the RV option on what turns out to be only one additional site, the portion of Lakewood Village west of 90th Avenue. Like the existing provision, it would continue to limit RVs to 25%, and that would be a cap of spaces in a park or park phase. And it would require an administrative site plan review and approval by staff. That's a very minor type of site plan process, but it is a process that staff would review and would issue an approval on. Staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the board adopt the proposed ordinance, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that y'all might have.
Any questions, gentlemen? No questions? Any questions from the gallery? Anybody like to come up and speak?
Did you open the
I
public
apologize.
hearing
No,
formally?
I open the public hearing now. Thank you, Bill.
Good evening. My name is Jody Ann Blood, 1455 90th Avenue in Vero Beach, Lot 40. I am a member of the Board of Directors of Lakewood Village. Our president, Chuck Bailey, apologizes he was unable to attend this evening. He's out of town. And our treasurer, Dan Thompson, who has done a majority of the work on the project, he is recovering from surgery, so he's also unable to attend. So I am here speaking on behalf of the board and the employees of Lakewood Village. We are the only resident-owned all-age facility in Vero Beach. We are not subject to the out-of-town corporations that own so many of the parks around us. We are very proud of our record of only having to raise our rent once in the last 5 years, and we're hoping the income derived from the RV project, if you choose to approve it, would be able to keep us from avoiding raising the rents again in the near future. We have done extensive pre-planning, engineering, electrical, plumbing, with the hope and anticipation that the Zoning Commission would see fit to approve this project. And we very much hope you vote to change the ordinance and to allow us to do so. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to come forward and speak? Okay, please.
Good evening. I'm Gwendolyn Ripp. I reside at Heron Cay. Heron Cay is a residential mobile home community which abuts Lakewood Village on the east side and is across 90th Avenue from the section that is designated here. I appreciate the factors that our friends at Lakewood Village are considering in this. However, I find it difficulty to support it for one main reason, and I brought this up at the previous hearing on this topic. We're both manufactured home communities. We're both subject to the provisions of Florida Statute Chapter 723. And I quote, can I show this here?
Yes, please. Thank you, Stan. Okay.
It's not in focus. Huh? Can you read that?
Yes, ma'am.
These are definitions that are contained within 723.03. Defining what a mobile home is, first of all, a residential structure, not originally sold as a recreational vehicle. A mobile home lot is for the placement of a mobile home. And a mobile home park is for the placement of mobile homes. And the primary use of the park is residential. Somehow or other, I do not see these RVs as residential. I know people live in them and travel in them. My recollection was, in part of the materials, it indicated there was a limit of a 30-day stay, so that does not come in the concept of residential to my way of thinking. I'm concerned, obviously I lack support for the previous change in regulation, although it did not affect us. It did not affect the larger parks. We were not consulted at this time, although they talked with Village Green and Countryside, who are a little further away from Lakewood Village. I'm concerned about the precedent that is being continued here. It's creeping, right? It affected Tanglewood and Ranchland on the previous things. Now it's creeping into Lakewood Village. In another few years, I'm afraid it may start creeping elsewhere. Approval of this, is setting a precedent for this possibility down the road. I question, therefore, whether the county commission can support manufactured home communities while allowing them to be eroded into other types of facilities that are not residential in nature. I thank you for the opportunity to address this. I recognize the concern, and I hope that you'll give due consideration to this legal aspect that I bring to your attention. Questions?
Any questions, gentlemen? Staff? Thank you, Mrs. Ripp.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come forward and speak? Please, sir.
Good evening. My name is John Bezeg, B-E-Z-Z-E-G. I reside at 7300 20th Street, Village Green, mobile home community. And I'd like to echo a similar voice of concern of this amendment that's being proposed. At face value, when you look at it, it is nothing less than an exception made to a well-written ordinance, an exception for one park only. And several things when I read the information. By the way, Director Bolden indicated that rest of the parks were contacted. Well, I don't know about the others, but I, for one, only got the associated emails a couple of days ago. And obviously, I'm very concerned, and in a little bit of amount of time, you can't do very much. Also, the other thing, at this point in time, in the middle of summer, you'll find that a large contingency of homeowners who reside at our large communities are up north, either on vacation or snowbirds. And so whatever you hear here is not a good representative of what is happening out there. But let me go back to the issue at hand. When I read the details, I read the letters and so on, and a couple of things came up that were a little bit odd, and I'm going to ask you, see if you can answer those questions. The first oddity was that with due respect to the park who wishes to allow RVs into their community, they are a District 3 park. Yet, according to the minutes and the letter, they petitioned the District 1 commissioner for assistance to help him in this case. That was number one oddity.
Well, just,
number
just so
two,
you understand, to stop you there, you can petition any of our commissioners.
Absolutely.
Just because they come from your district doesn't mean they just belong to you. They belong to all the people of Indian River County.
No,
so you can go to
what
any
I'm-
commissioner
What I'm
and ask for
implying
help.
about the
Just
oddity
so you
is
know.
usually the person who's in charge of that district should be very intimate of the surrounding area. No big deal. The other thing was that from the county commissioner's desk, there was a directive given to the zoning board to have a look at this, and staff looked at this, and as Director Boland pointed out, they came up with this solution. There's no background on whether anybody considered any other option. Now, I feel for the people of that one park who wish to have RVs. Even though there was only one person in that park who did not want to live in a campground, I can understand that. But the reason we are in this MHRP designation, years ago, thousands of us fought very hard to preserve our lifestyle and make it difficult to just quickly change use by park owners. And we enjoyed that. And what we see, and I think the lady over there made mention that there is a precedent is being creeping of allowing things. Now, this one happens to be an exception to a rule by one park for the rest of everybody else. Now, the question I'm asking is, the first thing that comes to mind is I already know a couple of parks that have both uses, mobile homes and RVs, that the county approved, and they're going happily. As a matter of fact, one of them happens to be exactly the same side, 72 acres, just like Lakewood Village. Lakewood has about 320 lots. So does that other park. So my question is, why wouldn't the zoning commission cater to the needs of these folks who want to be like those other people and set them up with that particular zoning, which is not MHRP. It's a CRVP. And we have several parks like that. And I think I heard a comment earlier mention that this particular park happens to be the only resident-owned community. Well, actually, I believe, according to county records, so is Tanglewood, which is part of our group of the MHRP designation. So I would like to ask that before this actually goes back to the commissioner's desk, that the zoning commission review this and look at alternatives of how these people can actually be helped, and reject the idea that what we, thousands of us, fought for years ago to maintain that large parks, 20 acres and plus, go with the zone, with the ordinance that's in place, and not make exception to one park. Thank you very much.
Sir.
Any questions?
Any questions, gentlemen? Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you coming
Thank
up
you.
and speaking. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak? Okay. With that, I'll close the public hearing. Gentlemen, do you have any further questions of staff?
Stan, can you kind of talk to and address the concerns on the narrowness of the approach here? Because ultimately, we're just talking about an exception at the end of the day. Isn't that correct?
I think in practice, that's the case, because it's such a narrowly crafted ordinance change that, again, would apply if adopted only to the portion of Lakewood Village that's west of 90th Avenue.
Okay.
So Lakewood Village is on each side of 90th Avenue?
That's correct. They have a phase on the east side as well. And one thing I will point out, because I'm not sure if the commissioners are familiar or not, this particular part, the portion that's on the west side of 90th Avenue of Lakewood Village Mobile Home Park, especially in the south end, they've had vacancies there for several years, year after year. I think there was a time after the 2004 hurricanes where, there were some RVs or temporary, housing was in there, and then after a few years, it went back. So they actually had some experience with short-term in that particular area, but My recollection of seeing the site over the years, and they've asked over the years about having RVs, like Lakewood Village representatives, that area has consistently been vacant, and that's where that's what they have in mind, I believe, for using this exception if it's adopted.
So if the Lakewood Village Park were less than 20 acres or less, we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
That's correct.
So what we're talking about is an exemption for 5 acres. Because
Yeah,
it's
essentially,
25.
you're correct. The portion west of 90th Avenue is approximately 25.
And are there other parks that are larger than 20 acres in Indian River County that have recreational vehicles and mobile homes?
I'm not aware of a mobile home park that's
Yeah.
that's large like that has RVs. I'm not aware of it.
Any further questions, gentlemen? Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I'll motion to approve per staff's recommendations.
Motion to approve by Jordan with staff recommendations. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Dr. Day. All in favor? Speak by aye.
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 All opposed? We have a 3-2.
Was there an opposal?
Well, I'm assuming that Brad and
Yeah.
Chuck
Si-
sustained because they
no,
didn't
no,
speak.
No, silence is,
Okay, well
counts
then,
as an
there we
affirmative
go.
vote.
So far, we're at 3, and we don't know what the other two are going to do here.
I must say I'm on the fence on this. Due to the issues raised, I struggle with pointing out one particular mobile home park and treating it. And in this case, I understand staff's rationale in the analysis, but I'm struggling with how the impact that could be seen elsewhere with that. So that's where I'm having some difficulty.
Now, I mean, I would think that if you're going to have a park that would want to make a change like this, and the people of the park didn't want it, this room would be packed full of people, letting you know they don't want that in the park in which they live. I think that has to be some determining factor in decisions that we make. And as we have it today, we don't have people from this park petitioning for us not to let this go forward.
So walk me through those other parks, Stan, that are 25 plus, that are looking to go the path of having some element of RVs. Right now, it's prohibited, exclusively prohibited. What's
Correct. The 20-acre standard was put into place, and that standard was specifically meant to protect the larger parks, who were the people who were against it and concerned that the owner of the park would perhaps do something that would change their lifestyle. Which is why the 20 acres was put in, because the only people asking for it were the smaller parks where they'd had some experience with RVs. And so Tanglewood has come in, another park, a grandfathered-in park off to the east of US 1, north of 12th Street. Again, Lakewood Village is, I think, at least for the portion that we're talking about, west of 90th, I guess they see themselves as the same thing, but for the acreage difference. And so we already have a requirement in there that is specific to try to cut out and protect the larger parks. And the way that this is written, it continues to do that. I don't deny that it's obviously
really,
it's.
Does it? I mean,
I'm sorry?
It really is just a Lakewood Park. That's it. I know how it's
That's
worded.
correct. That's going to be because there's. I think it's important to keep in the code that we're dealing with parks in existence before January 1, 2010, because we don't want to encourage a new one to come in. So, I mean, it's definitely, there's already some pretty narrow criteria in there for a reason, and this one is about as narrow as you can get, because it gets you down to 1. And no denying that.
Got it.
Anybody else have any further questions or comments? Chuck?
No. Answer all my questions.
Well, I'm gonna try this again. I have a motion on the floor by Jordan to approve. I have a second by Dr. Day. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, 5-0. Next order of business. Thank you. Next order of business, consideration of amendments to Land Use Development Regulations, LDRs, Chapter 901, Definitions, 911, Zoning, and 971, Specific Land Use Criteria to establish regulations for medical marijuana treatment centers. I'll hand this off to you, Stan.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. This is a land development regulation. If you're around in 2014, it may seem like deja vu all over again, so to speak, and that's kind of where we are. A bit of background. In 2014, there was an Amendment 2 on the ballot for an amendment to the state constitution to allow medical marijuana distribution and use in Florida. That vote was held in November of 2014, and it failed, getting support of 57.62% of the voters. It needed 60% to pass. And at the time of the 2014 vote, Indian River County and other local governments pursued local regulations to address potential negative impacts. And the reason for the timing of coming up with local codes is that if the amendment passes in the state of Florida, then the state would make regulations. And the concern has been that if the state makes regulations, sometimes they favor certain uses and they preempt local regulations. When they do that, they tend to grandfather in regulations that are already on the books at local governments. And so Indian River County, as well as other local governments in 2014, pursued getting something on the books that would be grandfathered in. And the negative impacts that were described in 2014, I think the Board of County Commissioners in 2016 have some of the same concerns. Potential negative impacts that have been observed in some locations and states. They either have medical marijuana allowance or recreational marijuana allowance. There can be problems of increased crime, loitering, dealing in other drugs, security problems, exposure to minors, and driving under the influence. And so the Planning and Zoning Commission considered an ordinance very similar to what's before you all tonight in 2014 and supported that. The Board of County Commissioners in 2014 had 2 hearings as was required. And on the second hearing, although they supported and asked Ashley to initiate the entire process, they did not pass the regulations since at that point in time. It was just after the vote in 2014. Because Amendment 2 didn't pass, they didn't pass the ordinance. Now in 2016, Amendment 2 is back on the ballot with a few adjustments, but still the ultimate result from a land use issue is the same. There could be dispensaries locally. And in April of this year, the Board of County Commissioners directed staff to do 2 things that they directed in 2014. One was to update the pain management clinic ordinance to include medical marijuana treatment centers in that ordinance. That's been handled by the county attorney's office, and that's been done. It did not have to come before you all. They also asked that the land development regulations be amended similarly to the 2014 initiative. That's in progress, and that's what's before you all tonight. Some changes to the zoning code. The proposed ordinance will be presented to the board ahead of the November 2016 vote. If the board approves it, it could be repealed if Amendment 2 ultimately fails, falling short of the 60% support. The proposed ordinance before you, again, like before, regulates medical marijuana treatment centers. That's defined as an entity that acquires, transfers, sells, or dispenses medical marijuana. The criteria that are proposed in this ordinance are the same as were proposed in 2014, not in the West Gifford Industrial and Commerce area, where there is some IG general industrial zoning. That's the only district where it would be allowed with conditions. So not allowed in the WGIC, again, 1,000-foot separation distance from schools, childcare, parks, and other medical marijuana facilities, 500 feet from residential and public designated zone sites, 200 feet from a thoroughfare plan road, and not located west of 66th Avenue, not wanting to get it near I-95 and to really serve the population of Indian River County if the amendment passes and a dispensary is put here. The proposed ordinance would prohibit drive-through, on-site cultivation, on-site consumption of marijuana and alcoholic beverages, limits the hours of operation, and requires security measures that are recommended by the Sheriff's Office, and it would require Planning and Zoning Commission review and approval as an administrative permit with these criteria in place. Like before, the locational criteria would allow for a facility, but it'd be in very few areas. In fact, you have to look really hard to see this one area here that is east of Old Dixie Highway. It's next to the FEC Railroad, north of 12th Street. Again, with the separation criteria, pretty remote, but it is an industrially zoned site, currently vacant. There's also a larger site, again, the only two qualifying sites here that I'm showing is north of 8th Street, between 8th Street and 12th Street, again, up against the railroad tracks. There's some existing buildings there. I'll show you an aerial in just a moment of the two sites. Here's the kind of the industrial site sliver north of 12th Street, actually next to some industrial zoning in the city of Vero Beach. And the other site is developed. It could have some tenant spaces in it, multiple tenant spaces in these buildings, again, against the railroad track, kind of off of Old Dixie, but again, accessible there. If the ordinance is adopted, those would be the only two places in the unincorporated area of the county where a dispensary would be allowed. And again, obviously, a very conservative approach to see what would, what might transpire if the amendment passed and we did get a dispensary. Mr. Emmons, did you have a question at this point?
Yeah, continue on that.
Okay, sure, sure. So staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended the board adopt the proposed ordinance. And once again, an ordinance proposed with very narrow geographic possibilities.
Any questions from staff?
So, if it passes in the referendum and an ordinance is not adopted by the county, it could be pretty expansive, correct?
Yeah, it would be interesting. We'd have to classify the use. What is the use? If it's a dispensary of a product, I mean, in essence, in our existing code, we probably treat it just like a drugstore or any other kind of retail. They would be allowed in any retail zoning district anywhere in the unincorporated county.
So I'm assuming in your research and analysis, you looked at other applicable.
We did, and what's typical here, I think, is that this is a very restrictive ordinance to kind of see how this kind of use plays out. It may be that more experience is gained, and you can, it would be easier to make it less restrictive in the future than it would be to make it more restrictive. So obviously, this is very restrictive, what we propose, and it's similar to what the city of Vero Beach has on its books already. Again, they've got one on the books now in the event that the amendment passes, and it has similar criteria. And these criteria are similar to what some other local governments have done in other states as well.
Stan, is that first site landlocked, or is there access to it?
There is, again, it's not an individual parcel. It's a portion of a parcel that has access from the south, from 12th Street.
Any further questions? Anyone? I'd like to open up the public hearing. Would anybody from the public like to come forward and speak?
Yeah, this is a no-brainer.
Thank you. May I distribute something to the members, or would you do that,
Please.
Stan? I think there's enough for everyone. It's more information than you'll ever need, but it's important that you have it.
Thank you.
And it's not for tonight. Don't you dare read that while I'm talking. Kidding, just kidding. Thank you. I want you to know that I strongly recommend staff.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Caroline Ginn, 5151 North A1A, Unit 305, Vero Beach, Florida, 32963. Thank you. I'm sorry. You wouldn't think that I would forget that. I strongly support staff recommendation, and I'm really thankful that the planning department has gotten out ahead of this, so that if this passes, we have something that we can do. It's already in place. We don't need to have it downtown because somebody looking for a spot, if we didn't have this, they could go anywhere. So this is very important, and I want to commend staff for getting out ahead of it. I just want to make a statement. The less you do to accommodate marijuana use, the better. The potential for abuse is enormous, and those who wish to prosper with its expanded use, whatever the reason, are difficult to expose, control, and convict. We do have medical marijuana. Do you know that? In Florida right now? It's called the Compassionate Cannabis Act of 2014, was signed into law by the governor on June 16th, 2014, and yet here we go again. This isn't good enough. This is what, you know, the people on the other side are saying. It's very controlled. As a matter of fact, there are only 25 doctors in the state of Florida participating, and that's the problem. They wanted to make it difficult, and they did. However, they made it a little too difficult, and now they're back and trying to get this again. I can't tell you how much I am against having a marijuana medical center or anything else. I want to read to you, and you have this in your backup, what would be available at that treatment center. Medical Marijuana Treatment Center.
And remember, too, we have all this in our backup.
You do. Do you mind if I read it into the record, sir?
Okay, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Means an entity that acquires marijuana, that cultivates it. Right now in Florida, we have 5 nurseries that are allowed to grow marijuana. Possesses processes, including development of related products such as food, tinctures, aerosols, oils, ointments, transports, sells, distributes, dispenses, and administers marijuana products containing marijuana-related supplies or I believe this is the least of it, educational materials. Nice that they threw that in. That's in the ballot. That is the language from the ballot initiative. That is what we would be voting on. It's a pot shop. That's exactly what it is. And it's a supermarket of marijuana products. I cannot tell you how strongly I hope you will be against this referendum, March 8th. Each one of you has a circle of influence, and I hope that you will try to influence the people that you know to vote no on Amendment 2 on November the 8th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to come forward and speak?
Good evening. I'm Joan Johnson. I live at 535 39th Court Southwest. You gentlemen should have been introduced to Caroline Ginn. She's a former mayor. She's former chairman of the county commission. And so she brings a lot of weight when she comes to speak before you all. That aside, I'm very disappointed. I understand what you're doing and you're trying to isolate, but we've just given up and conceded that this is going to be an abusive kind of situation, and we've got to isolate it someplace where it's an eyesore and we don't have to look at it. And it's disappointing to hear that we have to approach this way. It's a medical issue. There's all kinds of pharmaceuticals. There's all kinds of stuff we used to be able to buy in front of the counter. We have to now go behind the counter. Paregoric, for 50 years, I took it for stomach. Used to do something with drugs, so they've moved it behind the counter. If you want to buy it now, you have to sign a poison list, for pity's sakes. So I don't know why we treat this stuff differently than any other pharmaceutical. Why is it gets a standalone place?
I can't tell you, I don't make the laws. You know, I don't make those
Does the
laws.
law say it has to be a
No,
standalone
I think
place?
the law has got it as an illegal narcotic, and it's a controlled substance, so they're gonna
Right,
continue to control
and
it
there's
like-
all kinds of them. Now I go to the drugstore and it's regulated at the pharmacy through the doctors. Why do we have a standalone? Do we have to have a standalone is my question.
You'd
Does
have
the
to
law
give
say
your
we
senator
have
and
to,
congressman.
or can we not look outside the box and do it differently than the rest of the world?
I can't do it from here.
I think part of the answer to your question is that some of the major pharmacies don't want to vend medical marijuana, and so they just allow it to be sold someplace else that they don't want anything to do with. I think that's kind of what you're
I can't
seeing
imagine that
here.
once it's really legalized, that they'll stay with that opinion, because if there's money, they'll be there.
And again, this is the first step as far as the ordinance is concerned. Staff has come up with a very restrictive ordinance.
Oh, I understand that, and it just
Certainly
indicates
easier
that
to
we
go
quit.
bigger than go smaller.
Yeah, we've just given up on making sure it's a legal usage.
No,
Well, we can't, it's up to the voters.
we're not, we
And
don't make those
Stan,
laws.
I think we're
Beyond our
exactly
scope
where
here.
we were in 2014. I mean, this is a preemptive attempt to get ahead of it. It may be voted down in November.
I
But if it's not,
Yeah.
we're way better off to be dealing with this question right now
Yeah.
than we would be
Oh,
at our
I
December meeting.
understand that, I'm just asking, does it have to be a standalone? That's all.
Would anybody else from the public like to come up and speak? I don't know. Okay, no one else from the public would like to speak. I close the public hearing. Any further questions, gentlemen? No? Can I have a motion, please?
Move to approve staff's recommendations.
Motion to approve by Dr. Day. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Chuck. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. The next order of business, let me see here, would be Commissioners' Matters. Any Commissioners' Matters? No? Planning Matters, Stan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just wanted to let you all know that we do have at least one item for the August 25th meeting, so might see you in 2 weeks.
I won't be here, sir.
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll miss me.
You will. Thank you for running the meeting.
Thank you. All right, meeting is adjourned.
What about?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay,
No, he's
I have
done.
none.
He has none. We're done.
Positive.